We're live.
Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Wrestling Inc. podcast. I'm Glenn Rubenstein, joined once again by Wrestling Inc.'s own Raj Giri to talk about the first SmackDown of the new era. We're going to cover everything that happened last night, including the new number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship, who's going to face Dean Ambrose at SummerSlam. Raj, just quick in a word or two, broad thoughts about SmackDown last night.
Wow. I definitely thought Raw was better. SmackDown, it just fell flat. I thought it just didn't feel like it was on the same level as Raw. And I think part of that had to do with Finn Balor and having this hot debut and everything. Raw felt more fresh. Here you had the returns of Rhino, which we've already seen a couple times recently.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it fell flat.
Well, no, I definitely agree that it was the lesser show. I think the way the show ended for me went a long, long way towards redeeming it, and we'll talk about it in depth. So right before we head into the recap, just want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by our friends at Host Papa. Host Papa has powerful web hosting solutions, perfect for small business owners, digital entrepreneurs, and freelancers, anyone with a website. Go to hostpapa.com/wrestling. Use our exclusive promo code wrestling to save 15% off their popular shared web hosting packages. That's hostpapa.com/wrestling. So let's jump into recapping what happened last night on SmackDown. To start with, we had Shane and Daniel coming out talking about how, the show is going to be all about the fans. I thought the intro was really nice in how they set the tone. They walked out from backstage, and instead of on Raw, where we had the entire roster on, the entrance right in front of the Tron coming out. In this case, we had all the wrestlers around the ring. We had DB and Shane hop into the ring and talk about how the first thing they were going to do was have a six-pack match to determine who the new number one contender was to face Dean Ambrose at SummerSlam for the title, for the belt, that, of course, is staying with SmackDown. And, they came out. They announced that John Cena, no surprise, would be one entrant. Bray Wyatt, who we also predicted the other night, would be another. Baron Corbin, Dolph Ziggler, both of those sort of out of left field. AJ Styles, an obvious choice. And then it went on to announce that the sixth entrant would be the winner of a battle royal that was going to happen next on the show. So what did you think about, Raj, them choosing to start it off this way and go with the six-pack as opposed to the two fatal four-ways we saw on Raw, and having this sort of, it could be anyone sense with this battle royal to determine the sixth entrant?
I just thought it was way too similar to Raw. Having the multi-person matches to determine the number one contender. Even the hashtag was the same in the main event as Raw. I think, again, with Raw and SmackDown, I think people want them to be two completely different entities and to completely, different storylines. And I thought SmackDown mirrored Raw in a lot of ways, except not as exciting. And so, I wasn't a fan of how this played out. I mean, if TNA did this, they'd be like, "Oh, look at TNA blatantly ripping off WWE." I thought it was. I didn't like it.
I'll tell you, when they were announcing it, and I know we talked about this extensively on Monday in our Raw recap with Matt Morgan, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that, you have to go back and listen to that. Everyone is saying this is just a fantastic episode of the podcast, and I think it was awesome to have Matt's insight. I mean, he added so much to that episode and what we thought about Monday Night Raw. But I think that compared, to what we were talking about with all our different fantasy booking scenarios of where they could go on SmackDown with Dean Ambrose, it's funny. I mean, what the hell? I'll try not, spoiling it for once. I know we sometimes put it right out there at the start of the episode, but when they announced Dolph Ziggler as an entrant into the the six-pack, I turned to my wife and I was like, well, I'm not putting my money on him. That's clearly who's going to lose. And when they did the battle royal, it seemed like with the other thing we were talking about, where it was like, oh my God, this is actually going to be Kane. Somehow Kane's going to be the contender, and we're going to see Kane in a championship storyline again. Apollo Crews, I thought, to win that battle royal was a different choice, but in a way, sort of a boring choice. And I think that went a long way towards setting the tone of saying that, yes, anything can happen, but it might not necessarily be the most interesting thing that could happen.
Yeah, a quick note about the Battle Royal. Simon Gotch was the first one out, so I'm sure a message was being sent there.
Yeah.
With Cruz winning, I thought it was good that they had a younger wrestler win, a newer talent. But man, Cruz with that promo afterwards, it's like, yeah, he just came across like a high school kid who did well on his SATs. Yeah.
I just don't know what his gimmick is, aside from that he's super positive and incredibly likable. And that can work, but I was thinking about it. I was discussing it during the show where I was saying, I mean, you tell me, who would be more boring in a feud with Dean Ambrose than Apollo Crews? Can you name anyone on the SmackDown roster that would actually be less interesting to feud with Dean Ambrose?
Baron Corbin?
Corbin at least would say some mean
I
things.
agree. It's probably Apollo.
Yeah, no, Corbin would at least say some really mean things that would make you laugh.
He'd make you laugh.
Yeah, and that's something. And I like Apollo. I think Apollo was amazing in the ring. I just think that there's no there.
He needs to tweak his character for sure. He needs to get rid of the smiley, happy-go-lucky guy. That never has worked in modern wrestling. So I don't know why they keep going back to it.
Yeah. No, he would have been a good one to pair with Bob Backlund. Just have Backlund being like, you need to get some edge.
Yeah, that's.
And then then Backlund could talk about the ways that he was edgy, which would probably be not very, but it would be funny. Another note that boos when Mojo was eliminated during the Battle Royal, and I did decide today for those watching on the video version that I'm going to have to wear brand specific merch when we do these Raw and SmackDown recaps. Although I love Mojo and I love Zack Ryder individually. It occurred to me this morning, I'm not sure if I ironically or genuinely love the Hype Bros. I have to figure that out. So they're going to be on Superstars this week. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Cool. That was taped before the show. So Apollo Crews was determined to advance to the final match of the night, the main event, the six-pack. After that, we had these interviews and segments throughout the night of the six contenders. But we came back and went to Becky Lynch versus Natalya. Now, this was an interesting match in that if we're talking about what we saw on Monday Night Raw of giving the fans what they finally wanted, which we got on Monday night with Sasha Banks going over Charlotte, getting the belt, we finally saw Becky Lynch win against Natalya. I have to say the match itself, because it feels like we've seen this so many times now, maybe didn't quite have, my full attention and interest the way that it has in the past now. I mean, this was like the fourth or fifth time it feels like they've wrestled since Natty turned. Yeah.
They've been constantly going back and forth.
Yeah, and to me, the most notable part of the match was actually Becky, who did that amazing top rope leg drop that was just like on a dime with Natalya. I don't know if you paid attention during that moment, Raj, but online I'm already seeing that as like the #1 clipped GIF and piece of video from last night. It was just spectacular.
Yeah, that was a cool move. I mean, I'm not a fan of the 50-50 booking, and they did that here, just negating Natalya's win. If the idea is to get one of these girls over, just have them win 2 in a row. It gets them over stronger. But this was really more to introduce the women on SmackDown's women's division, and I don't know. I hope I'm not sounding overly critical, but I didn't like how they were introduced. It came across as hokey. It wasn't organic at all. Just when you come out and you introduce yourself by saying my name is, only Paul Heyman can get away with that,
or Enzo Amore.
Or Enzo Amore, exactly. Otherwise, it's just so contrived and overly scripted. And the one good thing, at least they're going with Eva Marie as a heel.
Did they have another choice in that matter?
Well, they tried. Remember WrestleMania? She was on the babyface team. So
yeah.
So at least that was good. But the rest I thought fell flat. And without a title, and I'm guessing down the line they'll create one. But it just feels less than Raw.
Yeah, and that was the thing that really struck me. So for those that didn't actually watch the show and are listening to our recap here, and by the way, I actually recommend, this was a SmackDown to watch regardless of it being a lesser than to Raw. And I think part of that is that Raw was just really, really good this week. But so the women came out, and in quick succession, we had, them each do a promo and introduce themselves, sort of trying to one up the next one and cut the preceding female wrestler off. But what I thought was absolutely to your point. I was thinking, man, it would really be great if there was some sort of title belt or championship or something that they were aiming for here, or else what's the point? I want to prove I'm the best. I want to prove I'm the best. Well, if there's no prize, it just kind of falls flat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and it ended really weird and abruptly. I mean, so Eva Marie had that new entrance with the voiceover, which I actually liked. I mean, say what you will about everything else about Eva Marie, but I like the idea that all the lights went to red. They had that sort of very hokey, male voiceover touting, how awesome Eva Marie was. I was like, okay, they're just really going for it at this point. They know she's never going to get over as a face. Let's just make her the most monster heel we can.
Yeah, I thought that was amusing. But, again, it was just so contrived. I miss the thing that's really missing in wrestling nowadays is stuff feeling organic and spontaneous. And this didn't feel like either at all. It was on the far end of the spectrum.
No, definitely. Although I think, I don't know. I don't know what I would like to see differently, but I thought that it was really odd that they did this and then it just ended abruptly. And it wasn't mentioned again during the rest of the night. I thought we were going to come back from break after that, and there was going to be an announcement about a women's belt, or maybe there was going to be a women's fatal 4-way. There was going to be something building out of that. So to me, that's my big gripe about it, is that it just absolutely went nowhere, which is unfortunate because lately it seems like there's tried to be more of a payoff in these segments as opposed to just, we're just doing it to do it,
Mm-hmm.
So Becky won, which was fantastic. But I don't know, that was then followed by a segment. See, and I don't know about you, but so Miz TV was next, and Randy Orton came out, and to me, this is where the show really started to drag. I thought the Miz TV segment went on for too long with just the Miz by himself, doing the thing of interviewing himself, giving that little swerve of, hyping it up like he was going to introduce Randy, making it all about him. Randy came out, and then finally it led to a match, but I mean, how many segments was that on TV? It felt like that was a good quarter of the show. Easily.
It felt like 3 at least, because they had Miz TV, then the match was 2. Real quick before we get to that, there was the promo about Shelton Benjamin coming back.
Oh, that's right.
And then Baron Corbin did a little promo. Again, back to the whole spontaneous thing. This promo wasn't it at all. Corbin, when you're just sitting there saying how you don't care, when your gimmick is that you don't care, you shouldn't have to say it. It should show. I think, like, if Steve Austin was out there back in the day saying, well, I'm a badass, him saying it would take away from the fact that he is one,
Yeah.
So I think having to go out there and explain your gimmick just kind of kills you. And so that was I thought these promos hyping the main event, again, overly scripted, not spontaneous, except for I thought Bray Wyatt's was good.
I like Dolph's. I like the Dolph angle of talking about, his parents, I like, and it played into that backstage segment, a few weeks ago. Was that him on the phone in the backstage segment? I remember confusing it with Ryder. I can't remember which one of them. They had something similar where they were talking to one of their parents.
Yeah, I'm forgetting that segment right now, but yeah, we'll get to Ziggler in a little bit.
Yeah.
But real quick, Shelton Benjamin, he's coming back. PW Insider reporting that Jinder Mahal just signed to come back.
Cool.
Not jumping ahead of ourselves with Rhino. Curtis Hawkins, possibly MVP. So they're bringing back a lot of old faces, but they're bringing back a lot of guys that never really made much of an, and this is no disrespect to these guys, because a lot of it is, how they were booked and things like that. But bringing back a lot of guys that didn't make a dent at all as far as, ratings or attendance or things like that. So it's filling the roster with guys that, people don't really see as stars in the first place.
Well, so that's the idea, really. Is it that creative, doesn't necessarily see potential for them to have a huge push, but they're seen as more sort of solid enhancement talent? Or
yeah, exactly. Just kind of filling out the roster and needing more guys. But I feel like they need to get, and I guess I don't really know who else is out there, but bring for every Shelton Benjamin, and Shelton did, was outstanding in the ring during his last WWE run. He kind of faded after that. He's an ROH. His New Japan run was not very good to say the least. But I felt like one Nakamura does more than bring back 4 or 5 of these other guys.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. So you just look at what you got sitting there in NXT, and you don't want to deplete NXT's roster. I understand, but I think a Nakamura to SmackDown would have helped balance out Finn Balor to Raw.
No, and I think with NXT, to your point, I think NXT is on the precipice of that, of having not the roster depleted, but having the draw, having the main anchors of NXT, of just not having that anymore, and it being in a rebuilding phase, which in a way I think is good. I mean, NXT needs to constantly rebuild itself and develop new superstars. I mean, they certainly run a danger of getting complacent, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can repeat all this magic that they've just been creating again and again and again with this next crop. But to that point quickly, just off the top of your head, I mean, if you had a fantasy, bring back of an old face for one of these positions, who would you pick?
Oh man. Drew McIntyre, I guess. I felt like he had a ton of potential, but he's under contract to TNA. I felt like he had a ton of potential. Lashley, you're seeing him kill it in TNA. He's doing the best I think he's done in his career. So off the top of my head, those are a couple of guys. What about you?
I personally would love for WWE Creative to call Damian Sandow and apologize and offer him whatever he wants to come back, because I think he would do really, really well, especially given with the way things are trending. And then also, I know we were talking about this in email. I think it's time for the return of the Funkasaurus. I think, Tyrus could come back. I think, that gimmick actually, if it were that gimmick again, I think that would actually fit in now better with some of the other superstars on the roster.
Yeah, I think if it was a month later, Damian Sandow wouldn't have gotten released. I think he got released when they didn't have the plans to split the brands. But yeah, Sandow, it totally slipped my mind, but that's a no-brainer. Yeah.
And that was the Miz TV segment. It just went on very, very long. What did you think of the match itself with Orton?
It didn't do anything for me. Orton, again, I thought his lines they seemed... During the Miz TV segment, I thought his line sucked. I thought, it was clear someone wrote them for him. And, when you're reading funny lines, and if you're not an Enzo Amore where you got that natural, that natural humor, it's hard to pull off. So, yeah, I don't know. Orton, is his first match back in, what was it, 9 months?
Since October.
And it just it felt flat, and after Orton hit that first RKO and when he's waiting around to deliver the second, it was just quiet in that arena. There was like no anticipation building or anything, even though you could see it, that he was either looking for, that kick that he used to do, which is banned, or another RKO. And the arena was just quiet. He came back and did it, but it just didn't feel like a top star returning in his first match in 9 months.
No, definitely. And I think that's the thing is that, he was so good on Sunday with Chris Jericho and that no enhancement needed line that, everyone was buzzing about and talking about. So to do another promo heavy Randy Orton segment and not have him top that or not have, some bombshell punchline that he could drop. I mean, I just felt it was anticlimactic. If they were going to put him in the ring, just put him in the ring. And again, it was another situation. I know we talked about this before, but one of those, the champ loses, but it was a non-title match, so it doesn't really count, which I don't know, kind of anticlimactic.
I've been complaining about that forever. I feel like a champ should never lose. Or very rare occasions.
Yeah. Although the Miz versus Randy Orton, I mean, I don't know. I think Orton should, the logic in me would be like, well, then Orton's winning. I mean, that's just, what I would expect.
Yeah, but you could have picked any of those guys in that battle royal to wrestle Orton in his return, So,
no, definitely. So after that, we came back to Heath Slater. Now, do you want to tell everyone a little about the gimmick that it seems like they're going with Heath Slater right now?
Well, it just, he's just unhappy with being, not drafted. I think it has to do with his eye injury that he suffered from Titus O'Neil, that he can't really wrestle yet. So it gives him something to do until he's, cleared to return.
That eye is freaking me out though, man. Every time where it's like, it looks okay from one angle and then from another, it's like, oh my God, it's do a little double take, you know?
Yeah. But you know, he's entertaining as hell, I think.
Oh, definitely.
I thought, you know, this was a entertaining segment, you know, and then Heath carried it.
So is there truth to the rumor? I'm sorry. Is there a truth to the rumor? So is what he doing? Okay. I know he tweeted on Twitter that he's the hottest free agent, right? And he's taking the free agent gimmick. So I've seen online, but I haven't seen this anywhere official. Is he actually going to book some indie dates? Are they actually letting him book some stuff, or maybe with Evolve? Or
I'd have to double check on that, but I haven't heard that. So I wouldn't put too much stock into it.
Yeah. I mean, that could just be fantasy booking. Sometimes I skim Squared Circle on Reddit, but I think, the idea that I'd read was that he might actually make this his gimmick now and do some indie stuff to, you know, as promo essentially.
They could do it. I just don't think he's a big enough name to put that kind of thought into it. But
yeah,
you know, like they kind of did that with CM Punk a little bit, but that was, you know, that was a big gimmick. You know, that was a big angle. For Slater, I have a feeling he'll be on one of the brands within a couple of weeks. You know, once his eye is ready to go.
So Slater from behind Rhino came out, sort of surprised everyone. To me, I loved seeing that Rhino is there, and so Rhino is on the SmackDown roster now, right? This wasn't just a one-off.
Yeah.
But I feel like his return at NXT at the last round of tapings and what was it, last week's episode, just kind of undercut the surprise pop.
Yeah, you know, Rhino, every time he returns, he gets that pop when he does the gore.
Yeah.
But within a couple of weeks, you know, he's kind of back to where he was. But you know, they need to fill it with guys, and Rhino's a name, so there you go. You know, he's not someone I see being a difference maker on SmackDown.
Yeah. And that's, I think, to be expected at this point in his career. But I thought the interplay with Shane was good. I like that Shane kind of, you know, was he telling Heath submit a resume? You know,
someone pointed out, because Heath Slater made mention of doing a search on him on the WWE Network, I think, and someone tweeted us saying, if you search for Heath Slater on the WWE Network, the first thing that comes up is Slater losing to a bunny. So that's not good for your resume.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's the thing. It's just, I like that there was some continuity though. I like that there was talking about, you know, the past, talking about, you know, all the previous stuff you've been involved in. That was kind of nice. And, but yeah, I think you're right that the injury makes sense that they would keep him from actually wrestling right now.
Right.
So before we get to the six pack, we just want to take a moment and thank a sponsor of this episode, which is Host Papa. You've heard us talk about it. Host Papa has everything you need to get an amazing website up and running, whether it's for your business, whether it's a fan site, your personal page, if you're a freelancer, no matter what it is, Host Papa has got your back. They have everything your business needs, including amazingly fast servers, professional email, automated backups, cutting-edge security, and hundreds of cloud-based productivity tools. And what's great about Host Papa is if you're brand new and want a simple experience for designing a website, they have a great drag-and-drop website builder. If you're more SEO intensive and sort of know your way around creating a site, they have a one-click WordPress installer, and you can customize it to your heart's content. But what's really awesome about Host Papa is they're not just there for you when things are going great. If something goes wrong, they have customer service available 24/7, 365, text, phone, or email. And if you need to learn something new in putting together your website, you can schedule a free, dedicated 30-minute one-on-one training session with one of their experts. No other web host does that, and it's a great feature. Shared hosting accounts start as low as $3.95 per month. They'll throw in a domain for free, and there's no risk because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit hostpapa.com to check out what they have to offer. And because they're fans of this podcast, they're offering our listeners an exclusive 15% off new shared hosting accounts. Just enter our code WRESTLING at checkout for a 15% discount. That's hostpapa.com/wrestling and use the code WRESTLING to save 15% off their powerful, reliable, and secure web hosting for small business owners and freelancers. Hostpapa.com. Thanks for sponsoring the show. So we move on to the six pack, the main event of the new era of Monday Night Raw. And
real quick before we get to that, there was that promo that AJ did. Do you have a hard time looking at AJ's hair now? Ever since Enzo started the soccer mom thing?
Yeah, I mean, going back even because originally that was a joke, that was a mean tweet on Edge and Christian, I think on the last episode of the season. So that was maybe 6 weeks ago. And I'll even go one step further. I actually dated a girl in the 90s with AJ Styles' exact haircut. So I get very confused feelings looking at him.
Just can't. It can't. I can't get it out of my head when I see him now. At least in the promos, in the ring, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't think about it as much. But
yeah, but now there are signs like this is going to keep growing and growing and growing to where I think. I mean, this is going to, creative is like this is the angle.
Yeah, it could be a thing.
Absolutely. So he was in the 6-pack, and. As for the match itself, here's what I liked about it is that if anything, redeemed this episode, it's that it recaptured what Raw had Monday night with this idea that anything could happen. And it felt like during that match, at any time, a lot of what we predicted the other night in both our sort of fantasy and nightmare scenarios, I was like, oh my God, Bray's going to win this. Oh, Cena's going to win this. This could be kind of, a little stale if that were to happen. I just for a moment I was even like, well, okay, I never thought Corbin was going to win it, but I especially did not think that Dolph Ziggler was going to win it. And for me, when they had that series of finishing moves and that ended with Ziggler very quickly doing the super kick and then getting the win, I mean, that was just a mark out moment for me. And I think that, Raw had so many of those Monday night that's where SmackDown fell short for me. But that last bit Dolph Ziggler, we talked about this the other night. It was my complete fantasy booking. It'll never happen scenario. The Dolph Ziggler will face Dean Ambrose for the championship, let alone at SummerSlam. And this is what we're going to build up to in the next month. That's where I was just like really, really impressed, really surprised.
Well, we differ greatly on this. I thought it was terrible. And this has nothing to do with Ziggler. This has to do with how Ziggler was booked. In my opinion, a world title match should be two hot stars. One's the champion and one is his guy up and coming, competing for the world title. If you had spent the last month and a half building up Ziggler, like he's back on a win streak, like he's really focused now on winning, then yeah, I think this would work fine. But when he's been losing up until like last week, I think he's won 3 matches since WrestleMania on Raw and SmackDown. Then to have him slip into a world title match, I think that's terrible.
And he pinned AJ Styles.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I understand why they did it. Look, SummerSlam has already got 2 blockbuster matches. You don't need a third. And you have a SmackDown pay-per-view, 2 weeks after? So you need to build your big world title match for that. So you don't want to give away a big star, but at least give Ziggler something ahead of this. Make him look like he's on the rise as opposed to he's a job guy who lucked into a world title shot one night.
But he's held the belt before. I mean, this isn't like,
Yeah, but then since then he's lost consistently. Yeah. I mean, he hasn't, like I said, he hasn't won a match on Raw and SmackDown, or he's only won less than a handful of matches on Raw and SmackDown since WrestleMania. So at least give a 3-week build of him winning and looking like a contender and like he's reinvigorated, as opposed to just do it in one night and just throw it away. Like I said, I understand why they did it. They need a big main event and I'm sure they'll probably go with Ziggler and either AJ or Bray Wyatt, for Backlash. But man, just do something to build them up. It's if you look at the world title matches, you're talking about keeping Raw and SmackDown on the same playing field. Raw's world title match kills SmackDown's at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
Just in terms of intrigue, in terms of interest, it's way more exciting. And so right off the bat, you got Raw and SmackDown not on an even playing field, in my opinion.
No, and I agree with that it's certainly a lesser. I mean, Dolph Ziggler, by no stretch of the imagination, is a Finn Balor. But that being said, I liked, so from a pure story perspective, and if we're going to look at the narrative arc we're going to see play out over the next month, I like the promo of all the 6-man promos. I thought Dolph's was the most interesting, and they talked about this is a chance to rebuild. This is a chance for him to sort of start over, talking about how, his glory days were behind him, and now he's going to get back on track. And I liked that it was an opportunistic moment, but it wasn't like that Darren Young crap where it's like, I just sat in the corner and somehow won this thing. I like that he timed it correctly, got AJ Styles by surprise, got the pin, and now I think we have a month to make him seem credible, because as it is now, I mean, not to, get too hokey with it, but I mean, remember, part of the reason the movie Rocky worked so well is the idea that Rocky Balboa fighting Apollo Creed, Rocky didn't earn that shot. They chose him because of his name and because he was a guy that they thought would look good against Apollo. He proved that he could do that. I like with Dolph.
Rocky wasn't 3-30 going into the fight with Apollo Crews either. I mean, he was someone who, they built as having he had the ability and the grit. He just wasn't on that level. And underdog stories can work, but when you have, again, like I said, you gotta put some sort of build instead of just throwing it out there right out, with just in your face.
But I think it sent a message, though. I think they were trying to send the same message that Raw was trying to send Monday night. Anything is possible in the new era of SmackDown.
Well, you could surprise fans and have Tank Abbott come in and get a title shot, against Stipe Miocic. But yeah, you get the surprise. Anything can happen, but it sucks, and it just it's a really bad example.
That's true. Virgil was backstage the other night. They could have brought him out, and that would have certainly been a surprise. But no, I think this was a little bit of fan service. I think this is akin to what they did with Zack Ryder and putting the belt on him for 24 hours.
I have no problem with it. Just give him a little bit of build is all I'm saying.
Well, the question is where they go from here. Next week is a make or break SmackDown. They really have to step up or just be satisfied with being relegated to being the B show.
Yeah, and before we get to next week and the announcing and everything else, we got to talk about Trendy Butler. Trendy Butler, you got to make sure to check it out. It's a fantastic clothing service that does all the work for you. And what you do is you select a style profile, and Trendy Butler has a stylist handpicked clothes that cater to you. Even better, for only $65, you get over $150 in designer clothes. I've tried it. I've used it. I wear it. It's a great service, and you can try it out at trendybutler.com and use the code wrestling10, and you get $10 off. So check out trendybutler.com and check them out on Twitter at trendybutler.
And don't forget to try out DDP Yoga, specifically their awesome Max Pack used by the likes of Chris Jericho, AJ Styles, John Cena, and tons of other WWE superstars who love using DDP Yoga. Seriously, we were talking about this with Matt Morgan the other night. Pokemon Go is one thing, but if you want to get in shape, you need a real plan, and DDP Yoga is the solution. You can get a special offer with 3 months of the app for free at ddpyoga.com/wrestlinginc. And The Resurrection of Jake the Snake, now available on iTunes, Google Play, PlayStation, Amazon, and Vudu. So make sure to check that out. Tweet DDP Yoga. Let them know that we sent you. You can also see the film on DVD, Blu-ray, and Netflix. Amazing documentary. If you watch that movie and you are not misty-eyed at the end, I want you to tweet me. Tweet me and let me know that you made it through, because I will tweet you back that you have no soul and certainly no heart.
Steve Austin got misty-eyed in that movie, so
that movie will break anyone. It is so moving. It is so compelling, and I cannot recommend it enough. The Resurrection of Jake the Snake, DDP Yoga. Watch the movie. You'll learn why Diamond Dallas Page is an absolute saint, and we thank them for supporting our podcast.
Definitely. But back to your point, and then we can get to some of these questions as well. But as far as next week's SmackDown, absolutely. This week, I just thought they were way too similar. The style, the way they opened the show, declaring the multi-person world title matches. And next week, if it were up to me, if I were Vince, I'd have the two writing teams not be able to talk to each other at all, have no cohesion at all, and have them write the shows before Monday, before Raw goes on the air. So that way, Vince could come up and say, all right, a couple things need to be tweaked because they're too similar between the two shows, and go that way and make them completely different, because this week they were just way too similar. And hey, part of that is probably, it's the first week. They need to get the world title situation sorted out. But they need to do something to put more variation in those two shows.
Yeah, and I mean, where do you think they go from here? I mean, in terms of making it interesting, I mean, do you think it's going to be predictable that we're going to see Styles versus Cena for the next month in the build up to SummerSlam? I mean, is it going to be sort of obvious choices? I
think Styles versus Cena is an obvious choice. I don't know what you do with Bray Wyatt. There just doesn't seem like enough top guys right now on SmackDown. And Bray Wyatt's, right at the top. So I don't know what you do with him. Am I forgetting a top baby face that would go good against Bray Wyatt?
Let's see. Randy Orton. I mean,
Randy Orton's facing Lesnar, so
yeah.
And then, same as Roman Reigns, there's no natural opponent for him, on the Raw side that I can think of. So it'll be interesting to see. I feel like you can kind of feel how shallow the rosters are now that they are split, and I don't know if bringing in these old guys that weren't not old guys, but stars from the past that weren't necessarily top guys, it doesn't change that situation. It fills out the bottom and the middle, but it doesn't change what's at the top, and that's really where you need a lot of work. But at the same time, SmackDown last night, they had I think only a total of 4 matches, right? Battle Royal, Natalya.
If we don't count Rhino versus Heath Slater. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
4 1/4.
Randy Orton in the main event.
Yeah.
And, if you were to take all the people out of 6-pack with Cena and AJ Styles and Bray Wyatt and mix them up, it would have felt like a more star-studded show. But yeah, you only have a handful of guys at the top, and you can only mix and match them so much. So they've got to, really push some guys to the top.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see where they go, but I think next week is make or break. I'm going to keep watching. I mean, there's enough going on that I'm optimistic about it, but it's amazing. If you look back to what we discussed a week ago after the draft, it seemed like, I don't know about you, SmackDown was the show I was more excited for of the two. And this week, Raw was just, for a 3-hour show, I was thoroughly sports entertained.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Which show did you think had the better announcing?
Oh, that's a good question. JBL seems like he's entering the early stages of senility, just with, sort of some of his rambling. David Otunga, I don't think adds anything. I think he's sort of Mr. Obvious. And if I feel like if you put me on the announcer table and I wasn't sure of what to say, I would do what David Otunga does, which is just sort of repeat the most obvious thing, and you could be, yes, he sure does look good in the ring. It's just, he makes sort of these very general positive quotes. However, Morrow, okay, so here's my question about Morrow, because I think Morrow just kills it to the point where it's, sometimes he's like almost a parody, like an SNL sketch of an announcer with his quick little pop culture references and ways of tying it in. Do you think he starts the match with a list of stuff he wants to reference and works it in, or do you think that's all off the top of his head?
Man, the guy's an encyclopedia, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's all off the top of his head. But I was shocked this week that I enjoyed the announcing on Raw better. I think Morrow, I think they made a big mistake by taking Lawler off. Yeah, you could have kept JBL. He just isn't entertaining anymore. I just don't think he adds anything positive to either show. So I would have rather, it's fine to have Otunga. Like you said, he doesn't add anything, but if you want a third person, someone, who's good looking and kind of, then fine. Otunga fits the bill. But Lawler added so much more working with Morrow than JBL.
Well, and I think that, although speaking of JBL adding something positive, he did once again try and put Mojo Rawley over. It's just shocking. If I had to bet on who JBL was going to build up or crap on, Mojo definitely would have been my predictions for someone JBL was going to try and bury. But yeah, I think that it's just, and we're not going to get the Maggle anymore. We're not going to get, it's just, he's got to, I really loved that, man. Once that was pointed out to me, once I read that, I can never unhear that now when he says it. Yeah, it's just, that was where it was the lesser. But Corey Graves on Monday, Graves, I think, has been ready for his spot, calling the main roster for quite some time now. So I think Monday was just, he was so good, and that really took it to a whole other level because he was fresh. He was coming in, and Graves is at the top of his game with doing commentary.
Yeah. I agree. I think Graves was a great choice. I just think Lawler would have added so much more. Someone's asking us to talk about the ratings on Monday. The Raw rating, I think they did 3.3 million viewers. It was up a bit from last week. after a pay-per-view, a good number for what they've been doing lately. Here, let me pull it up real quick. The bad thing is, this is something they've been seeing anyway, but the viewership dropped each hour. It started off at 3.412, then went to 3.35 for the second, before hitting 3.254 in the third. This is what Vince Russo was talking about this on Sunday on our podcast. NXT has an audience, but at tops in the US, at best, it's 1 million, because that's how many subscribers they have outside of illegal streams and stuff like that. And trust me, not everyone that has a network watches NXT. So when you don't build these guys, you're going to get a big pop, because there's enough diehards in the audience that know who Finn Balor is, but enough people at home don't. So that's one thing. You get a surprise, you pop the NXT crowd and the hardcore fans, but a lot of the casuals don't know who he is. And I think the viewership probably reflected that.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that works out in the long run. I've seen in other media, right? In music, you have the idea that there's a lot of discovery when a mainstream artist will shine a light on an indie artist, or maybe do a collaboration or share the stage with them, that makes the mainstream look cooler, but at the same time gives that exposure to people that want to be in the know to discover the lesser known artists. And I think with Finn Balor, I think that's going to be the case, where, I think a lot of people got done watching Monday Night Raw and went on YouTube or went on the network to learn more about this guy.
Yeah, I just think if you like that video package they did for Balor on Raw, I think if you had spent like 3 weeks doing these video packages saying Finn Balor is coming soon, showing his dragon character, I think that would have gotten people excited, and people that don't know him would get an introduction as to who he is. But again, now they do know. Now they know he's someone to be taken seriously. So we'll see where we go from here. But I don't think WWE should keep assuming every time they bring up someone from NXT that everyone's going to know who they are. And I think some video packages and more of a introduction would do them some benefit.
Well,
go ahead.
I was gonna say 2 points to that. One, they're bringing up so many people from NXT and so fast. I don't know how they effectively build them at this rate with that strategy. Two, what did you think? We didn't touch upon this on SmackDown. What did you think of them re-showing that American Alpha package? Because I felt like they've used that on NXT before, that exact same package that they put together. What do you think of that to build American Alpha's debut on SmackDown next week?
Right, and to your point about building up everyone, I definitely don't think they should do that. I think they should build up the people they're planning on having, being big stars. And American Alpha, I think it was great. They're in the tag team division. They're not going to be pushed to be single stars anytime soon. So you don't need to do a gigantic, build for them. So I thought it was fine. Again, I'd rather a few weeks of video packages to introduce them, but for a tag team, I thought it was good. I'm excited for American Alpha. I think that's that's the biggest get for SmackDown from NXT. But the bottom line is that they are in the tag team division with no tag titles. So.
Yeah. Well, and they have the challenge, though. For American Alpha, I think a lot of their appeal in NXT and the way they got massively over in NXT is that we got to see their story of them coming together, of Jordan being reluctant to sort of go along with Gable's enthusiasm. We got to see this really great build of their partnership, and they're not hitting a reset on that. They're coming in already, fully defined and fully formed characters. I'm curious if on their charm and technical wrestling ability alone, that will get them as over with the SmackDown crowd as it did with the NXT universe. Yeah, I agree. Someone's asking us to predict the SmackDown viewership. What are you predicting? So what was Raw at this week?
Raw was 3.3 million.
I think SmackDown is going to do less. I'm going to say like 2.7.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm guessing. 2.7, 2.9, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. It'll be interesting just to see how it shakes out with them having to, have the competing brands this way. and that's sort of a dicey situation, right? Because to put them in competition, and to your point, and I get this, looking at it from a big picture sort of view, is that this week it seemed like if they're going to be in competition, SmackDown let me put it this way. It would have served SmackDown very well to have been the stronger show this week for the long-term prospects, because a lot of people have been predicting it's going to be the B show, and to start off feeling like the B show is not a good place to begin with,
Right. Absolutely.
And I could see where, that would cause concern for some people. So coming up this week, we got NXT tonight and the Cruiserweight Classic. You been following the Cruiserweight at all?
I haven't the last couple of weeks. Have you?
I watched the first episode, and I literally just decided I'm going to binge the rest once we get a little further in. I feel that I think it'll make a really good Sunday to sit there and just watch the whole thing, because it'll be easier to follow and digest all these new wrestlers that I'm being introduced to.
Yeah, there's so much wrestling going on right now with the G1, Cruiserweight Classic, NXT, Impact. It's hard to keep up with it all, and especially if you got kids or stuff like that. It's a tough balancing act.
Thank God it's summer. I mean, my wife and I watch a lot of TV, and she's as into wrestling as I am. So thankfully we're able to consume all of this. But if this was regular TV season, something would have to give. I mean, let me ask you that. If you had to cut one of the three shows, one of the three brands, which one would you drop of Raw, SmackDown, or NXT?
You mean just watching wise?
Yeah, just from your viewing repertoire.
Yeah, it would probably have to be NXT right now, just from what I do. It's kind of the least important as far as on a weekly basis in the building to a pay-per-view, but it's also often my favorite show of the week.
No, I love NXT, but I feel like the reason why Raw and SmackDown are so essential viewing for me now is everyone that I've loved on NXT for the last year is now on Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, I agree.
Save for Nakamura and a few others,
Right.
So no, I'm with you on that. Did we touch on everything? Do we have anything else? Any other questions?
Let me see. There's a couple other questions here. Is this the same Dolph they made look like a goof forever doing jobs? Why should I care? Same one.
Again, but Zack Ryder, man. I mean, similar template.
And look at where Zack Ryder is. It did nothing for him. Fans don't think of him as a star. He's not moving numbers at all. So, it's until you do it, until you do it with someone like Daniel Bryan is the one I can think of that worked. But that's someone that was really connecting hard with the audience. Is connecting strong with the audience. I don't see that going with. With Ziggler, again, with the right push and some time, give him a little build.
I just think, to me, it signals a world of potential and opportunity in that if they'll give Dolph Ziggler this run against Ambrose. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks he's going to win. I think, I would love to see what the betting odds are going into SummerSlam, but I don't think anyone predicts Ziggler is going to win. And if he does by some means, then yes, the WWE has told us literally anything is possible. But I think what's good about this is if they can do this with him, it makes me optimistic that they can do this with someone else. That's not going to just be the predictable guys we talked about, like upside Bray, downside Kane. There's more options now.
But what would have been better, in my opinion, is if you had Ziggler turn heel on Ambrose during the opening segment. Like you have Shane and Daniel Bryan with Dean Ambrose saying they're going to decide on an opponent for for him for SummerSlam. Ziggler comes out saying he wants to be there. They brush him off, and then Ziggler, just attacks Ambrose later, and you turn him heel and then start that build, and you give him a reason as opposed to just winning a match out of the blue.
Yeah, I think it's where they go from here. I think this is the start of the story. Ziggler, not accidentally, but Ziggler lucks into this opportunity. Where does he go from here? How do we keep it interesting? But yeah, I think it's also, what do they do with Ambrose to keep him interesting? Because Ambrose for the last month has coasted off the history of the Shield, his pre-existing relationships with Roman and Seth that were really strong. Does Ambrose have enough material to play with now to where he's going to be compelling and dynamic for the next month?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's always tough when you got babyface versus babyface. Someone's got a good question. Do you see Finn versus Seth being the main event of SummerSlam?
Well, I think the unfortunate thing is, I think Brock versus Orton is going to be shoved down our throats as the real main event of SummerSlam. Which, by the way, I mean, I don't know if I've expressed this before. I'm kind of indifferent to Brock Lesnar. I mean, I think he's a monster and, you know, he's good at what he does, but there's just no story there. There's nothing there to make me care about it. I mean, if I want that, I'll watch UFC, you know, if I just want to watch Brock dominate. What are your thoughts?
Go ahead. So what do you think? You think it will be Randy and Lesnar?
I think it's actually, there's going to be, and this is why it could be good. I think there'll be 3 main events, you know, really. So we'll have Seth versus Finn. We'll have Styles versus Cena, and we'll have Lesnar versus Orton. Ziggler versus Ambrose is going to be like, hopefully not the cool down match, somewhere in between those.
It might be the opening match. Remember how they'd always do that back in the day with the brand split, where the SmackDown World Title match would be opener or really early in the card. But I think they'll probably go with Lesnar and Orton. But if it were up to me, I'd go with Balor and Rollins. Yeah,
it'll be God, I don't know. I think Styles versus Cena, if they'd gone with that momentum after initially setting it up, you know, I could see that being huge, but I feel like this will be round 3, round 4 between those guys. So that'll kind of, you know, it takes some of the wind out of the sails.
All right. And let's get one last question here. Yeah. Someone asking about having Bray Wyatt versus Rhino at SummerSlam. I think that's a great idea.
I think that's really good. Although, do you think that makes Bray seem less relevant, you know, just in his standing?
I think it makes him less relevant if he's not on the card. And I can't really think of anyone else to put him in. You know, like WrestleMania, he wasn't even on the card and was used as fodder against The Rock. So I think having him, you know, if they have Rhino stay hot for the next few weeks and you have Bray kind of destroy him over the next couple of months, I think at least you're using a name from the past to get this guy over. And then you can move Bray into that world title spot.
So Bray seems, at least from last night, like he's deliberately changing the look. We're going to be seeing more Bray solo now, it looks at this point like it's happening. He's going for full dreadlocks. Did I spot that correctly?
Yeah, I actually kind of liked his new look. It's changing it up, and he stands out.
No, and I think it's wise that if we're going to be seeing him solo, that he's going to be doing something a little different. But that in and of itself is kind of interesting, right? Like, I mean, if we get a real Bray push and not just the Wyatts, but actually Bray, I mean, that's very promising for his career.
Yeah, they've done it before. It's kind of deja vu. They've done it before when he was feuding with Ambrose, and they could be going back to that. But I think he's got tons of potential. He should be. I'd like to see a world title reign with Bray Wyatt on top. I think that's where they should go next.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting, and they could do some interesting stuff with SmackDown. You know, if Bray sort of set a tone for it. So
Bray as champ opens up. It's different, but he's a guy who's been near the top for so long that it's credible, and I think you could do a lot there.
Yeah. Cool, man. So anything else before we wrap this up? Take it home.
I think that's it.
Cool. So thanks to you for listening and watching the Wrestling Inc. podcast. This is the first of our brand new Wednesday edition. We're going to be recording it every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time. And of course, Monday nights, right after Monday Night Raw ends, we will be here live on the Wrestling Inc. website. The podcast will go out shortly thereafter. And please subscribe, leave us a rating, let us know what you think of the show. We appreciate you checking us out and staying with us. Want to thank, of course, host Papa, DDP Yoga, and Trendy Butler for sponsoring the show. And Monday night, Raj, is our guest confirmed?
Yeah, it should be Matt Morgan again. He got a lot of rave reviews, so we're looking to have him on board again.
Yeah, Matt was great by popular demand. We hear you. We agree that he is awesome and look forward to have him back on the show on Monday. So until then, I'm Glenn Rubenstein. That's Raj Giri. You can find us both on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Monday night.